Thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Ken Graetz is the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Technology Services at Winona State University, and Dr. Stephen Thomas is the Associate Director of the Center for Integrative Studies in General Science at Michigan State University. So there are two EdTech experts today who will be joining us for this panel. You can follow along with us using the hashtag TopHatTech on Twitter. You can also follow us at our Twitter handles. So there's TopHat and Graetz and Craniumation, which is Stephen's Twitter handle. You can also follow us at the Facebook link or TopHat. Facebook.com/TopHatU. So for those of you who want to participate on the Top Hat platform, so we'll be asking a couple of questions throughout the webinar, and participation would be highly appreciated. And so you can definitely do that via our Top Hat platform. You have two different ways of doing that, either via the web browser or the cell phone. Sorry about that, not sure what just happened. Okay. Let's just get back to that slide now. Okay, so for the web browser, you can go ahead and type in on the URL http://app.tophат.com/login/272293. So again, it's 272293. This is the URL that you need to put in. And it should take you to the next slide, which I'll show you in just a moment. I'm going to give everyone a chance to put that URL in. So all you need to do is open a new window and type in that URL. Once you're on the Top Hat platform, you can actually just follow the webinar off of the platform, which I'll show you in a moment. So this is the page it should take you to, a course login. If you do have any questions about that step, you can definitely chat it to us via the GoToWebinar control panel. Once you're at this page, you just need to click on the blue button, Create Anonymous Account. And once you've pressed on that button, it should take you to this screen. So you should be in the Top Hat platform. If I demagnify my slides like you saw before, you can see this is the Top Hat platform. And so when I launch any questions for you, you can answer them directly off of the platform. You just need to click on the response or type in your answer and then click the submit button right over here. As well, on this platform, you can actually ask a question. So if you do have any questions, you don't have to go back to the GoToWebinar control panel to ask it. If you're following along via the Top Hat platform, you can go ahead and ask a question. Under the discussion, there will be a big button that says Ask a Question. This is what will pop up once you click on that button, and you just need to type in your question and give a little bit of an elaboration if necessary, and then click Save, and I will get it on my platform right here on the side. So for those of you who prefer to text in your answers, you can also do that via a cell phone. So for US numbers, this is the number that you would need to program in your phone right now. And for Canadian audience members, this is the number that you need to program in your phone. So I'll read it out loud for you. The US number is 315-636-0905, and the Canadian number is 647-931-6505. So go ahead and program those numbers in your cell phone right now. If you want to participate via texting, all you need to do is text that number input the question code into the text box right before your answer. So when a question pops up, I'll show you exactly where you can find the question code to put into the text box. So I'll give everyone just a couple more moments to program those numbers if they want to text in their answers. All right, so and for those of you who don't want to participate on the Top Hat platform, you can always ask a question you should see a question panel similar to this on your screen right now, and you can always ask a question right there, and we will get that on our end, and hopefully be able to answer it at the end of this webinar, or if we can't get to it in time, we will definitely email you an answer as well. All right, so let's get started. So welcome to Technology in the Classroom, a Blessing or a Burden. We're going to start with a brief introduction of the topic, and then we're going to let our panelists take over with current research on education technology, the pros and cons of using education technology or technology in the classroom, the future of ed tech, current resources available, as well as the impact of the adoption curve on higher education. So before we do that, let's just have a brief word answer question. So for everyone either following along on the Top Hat platform or texting in your responses, I'm going to launch a question for you. So which technologies, if any, are you using in your classes? So to answer that on the Top Hat platform, you just need to scroll up from your slides, and you'll see a little text box, and that's where you can answer the question, and then don't forget to click the submit button. So I'll give it a little more time. We have some submissions coming in, 5 submissions. All right, we're just waiting for a few more. Again, if you're texting in, this is the code that you would put before your answer, and this is the number that you need to text to if you're in Canada. The US number is actually not up right now, but either way, you can text to the Canada number. And this is the question code again that you'd put before the answer. Okay, so I'm going to disable submissions at this point, and then let's see. So we have some saying none, laptops, computer, PowerPoint, and projector, Blackboard, turning technology, clickers, okay, the Android tablets, clickers, Blackboard, clickers. So it seems like everybody has, see that in a word cloud. It seems like everybody is using different technologies, which is excellent, or no technologies at all. Okay, so let me close that question, and we can go ahead and proceed with the webinar. So let's start with some statistics on the use of technology. So from a survey conducted by the Pew Research Center in 2014, we find that 87% of adults in the US use the internet. 97% of the adults in the age group of 18 to 29 years old are also internet users. So that's a high percentage in that young generation segment, with 97% of Americans with a college degree or higher as internet users. So generation and education level are both independent factors that contribute to the heightened likelihood of being an internet user. Let's go on to some more statistics about cell phone use. So Pew Research Center also conducted a survey of adults in the US in 2014 with regards to their cell phone use. So 93% of adults in the US own a cell phone. 98%, so again, we're seeing that generation segment has a heightened use of technology. So 98% of 18 to 29-year-olds in the US own a cell phone, and 93% of Americans with a college degree or higher are cell phone users. So the generation alone seems to be associated with a higher percentage of cell phone owners. So really that 18 to 29 generation. So what is society's conception of technology given all of these strong statistics? So a simple Google search will actually tell us that our society's conception of technology is not that great. So you type in "is technology" into Google, and the first 4 searches that you get are good or bad, killing us, making us lazy, or socially neutral. So despite technology being prevalent in our everyday lives, we still seem to be skeptics about it. We mass adopt it, but remain ambivalent about its utility and its effects. There's a persistent bias against technology in our societies, as well as a paradox between our suspicions about technology despite its widespread implementation in our lives. So we're unsure how to label it. We're still bordering on, unwilling to fully accept it. It seems, despite how much we use it in our everyday lives. So let's go ahead and have another question for you guys. Which image best describes your experience with technology in the classroom? So this is going to be a click on target question. You again just need to scroll up above the slides and click on whichever image best describes your experience with technology in the classroom. And then don't forget to click the submit button afterwards. So for those of you texting in, you would not be able to participate in this question. Okay, so let me go ahead and disable submissions here. And let's see what the results are. Oh, so it seems like we have some confusion, a lot of success, and a lot of excitement, but no anger or sadness. So that's excellent. That's really great. Let's continue on with the webinar. So what do we know about education technology? So from a PBS study in 2011 of 500 teachers, we learn that 91% of teachers have access to personal computers or laptops in the classroom, but 22% feel that they do not have access to the right level of technology in their classroom. So despite teachers having access to personal computers in the classroom, they still do not feel that they have the right level of technology in their classes. So computers aren't enough anymore. The creation of new technologies results in laptops or computers no longer being sufficient to optimize learning in the classroom. They're in need of more technological resources than just computers. This statistic is strengthened when coupled with the fact that 50% of students, 53% of faculty, and 77% of administrators do work every day on tablets and smartphones at U.S. colleges and universities. So that is another survey done by Box in 2013 with a sample size of 700 students, faculty, and administrators. Technology is being used more and more to complement academia outside the classroom, but this level of technological adoption is not being implemented within the classrooms at the same rate, it seems. So let's go ahead and I'll pass it over to my colleagues, or my panelists, not my colleagues, but our panelist hosts, Ken and Stephen, to take over with the current research on technology in an academic setting.
Thanks, Amanda. So you can call us your colleagues.
Okay. Perfect.
My name is Ken Graetz. I'm the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Technology Services at Winona State University. It's a comprehensive liberal arts university that is right on the Mississippi River, just above La Crosse, Wisconsin, about 2 hours south of Minneapolis, St. Paul. We have about 8,000 students, and we've been integrating technology for a long time. So we've had a one-to-one laptop program since 2003, And just last year, we expanded that program to include tablets. So in addition to a laptop, every incoming student gets a tablet, and they can choose between an iPad and an Android Tab 4 and an iPad Mini, and then they get either a MacBook Air, or we're using HP 840s now on the PC side, so they have a choice in terms of platform. So 2 observations so far. Stephen has a much more creative Twitter handle than I do, so I need to work on that.
No judgment.
And then when Amanda was reading through all of the questions that we're going to answer today, I just had this panic attack, in that these are huge questions, and they cover a tremendous amount of ground. And so what I hope we can accomplish today is to touch on several of them that are emerging or pressing questions for a lot of us today. So I've been doing this for 25 years. So as a faculty member, integrating technology into my classes, my background is in psychology. And then I've been doing faculty development for the last 20 years at 2 different universities. And so these same questions we were asking ourselves 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and now currently. So for me, the question really is, are the questions somehow different today? And I think the answer is yes. So just in terms of some of the research that we tend to pay attention to at Winona State as we're doing what we're doing, and again, this is just a couple of things out of an enormous amount of literature that's out there. But 2 of the questions that we're really interested in are, what can we say about current adoption and usage? And Amanda had some statistics about that. But the EDUCAUSE study of students, faculty, and IT is a really good source of information. And it's also a study in which your school can participate. And we do that every year. So our faculty and students participate in that data gathering process, and that's been going on for a couple of years. The faculty survey was just conducted last year, the first one, and just a couple of real quick bits of info from that particular survey. In terms of usage, about 1/3 of faculty report having taught a class online, and these are college and university faculty. About 75% of faculty report being satisfied with their learning management system, whether it's Blackboard or D2L. There's a high level of interest among faculty in early warning systems. Technologically, can we get information about our students to help us intervene sooner? On the student side, an enormous increase, as you all know, in the number of mobile devices that students have in their hands when they come to campus and walk into your classrooms. So 86% right now have smartphones. That's up from 76% in this study last year. 47% are coming to campus with tablets, up from 31% last year. 54% connect to the campus network with 2 devices simultaneously, so a phone and their laptop. And about 83% of the students report using a learning management system in at least one course. I think that's actually lower than it probably is. So learning management systems have just been have been taking off, obviously, over the last 10 years, and are pretty commonly used on campuses now. So in terms of blessing when it comes to usage, I think the adoption continues to increase across a wider range of teaching strategies. Students and faculty are using their technologies in class and outside of class much more than they used to. They're feeling more comfortable and confident in their usage, and they're reporting greater levels of satisfaction with the technology that they're using. On the burden side, faculty report needing much more time to rework their courses, to integrate technology. They're feeling overwhelmed by rapid growth and change. They're seeing their classrooms as much more out of sync with what they want to do than they used to. So We'll talk more as we go about flipped and active learning in class.
Can I chime in here?
You bet. Sorry.
Uh, no. It's actually it's at the exact stage because I think what's really interesting. So I'm at Michigan State, and we have over 40,000 students. And I think what's really interesting is the difference between strategies of institutional strategies for how you deal with technology. Most of our systems are very decentralized, and so we don't have a central center for like how do you integrate technology into teaching. And so I think many of our faculty members are really burdened by this, by the idea that you just mentioned about how do you incorporate technology and take the time, especially at an R1 university where the main incentive is about publications and grants.
Mm-hmm.
And so the time investment is really heavy. And so I think that faculty are highly concerned about how do I keep abreast of what's going on while still maintaining all the other things that I have to juggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me back up a little bit too, because we just sort of dove in. I'm hoping that I'm not seeing the questions that are being posted, but I'm hoping that we can get some Q&A going here during the session as we go along. So please post any questions that you have or comments.
Let me double check that we have. If we don't have any questions, nope, no questions have come in yet. So as Ken said, please feel free to ask your questions via the discussion. It's very easy. You just need to click on the create and then you type your question and save it, and I'll have it right here. So please, Ken, continue. Sorry to cut you off there.
Well, I'll just cap this one off. And in terms of
Perfect.
burden, when it comes to usage, I think we've already talked about the concerns that faculty have. I think that the disconnect between learning spaces and pedagogy is starting to be felt more acutely now. So, and that's showing up in the data. In fact, and this is probably interesting to top at, is one of the lowest levels of satisfaction among faculty with technology in the classroom was with clicker systems. And I believe they were focusing more on the old style handheld clicker systems, but that was an interesting result, I thought.
So Ken, that point about they're talking about the older clickers brings up a kind of a new thing that I've been thinking about a lot, which is this, because tech is changing so rapidly, thinking about how do you build best practice when the research is falling 3 to 4 years out from your technology curve.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I've been thinking about is, does it actually place a larger burden on actually having assessment and evaluation built into your classes in order to understand how well? Like, you can't wait on research to tell you what the best practice is. You actually have to do some of the groundwork yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So we try to do as much data collection locally as we can. The other issue is getting that data in front of the people who are making the decisions on campus. So
Right.
in trying to work with your institutional research group, and those are all challenges. And I would say we're not the best at it. You know, I don't. If you have any good practices, let me know. Because
No, I think we are kind of on the development curve of ramping up to having a more centralized vision of what technology and teaching means at our
right.
So you all, I think, are much more on the cutting edge of, incorporating actual hardware.
Yeah. I think the other couple other findings from that EDUCAUSE study that are interesting to us is the preference among students for hybrid courses. So that blending of online and face-to-face. So 75% of students 18 to 24 reported preferring that type of a format. And students over 25 preferred it less, but they compensated by preferring fully online more than the 18 to 24. So that's interesting.
I thought another point was when they were asked about what students thought about their instructors using technology, invariably they said they wanted them to use more,
Hmm.
except when it came to social media. And then they wanted them to use less of social media in
Right.
class.
Right.
So I wonder if that's actually a drawing of lines, please don't engage me in my social world here.
Yeah. Yeah, we're actually having some trouble. This is a bit of a tangent, Amanda. Sorry, but a little bit of trouble, and I don't know if anybody else is out there with student use of social media in terms of these tools where they're anonymous and the posts aren't permanent, like Fade and Snapchat and that sort of thing.
Right.
So we're kind of, it seems like students are maybe moving away from the social media that we are now, the adults are now, or the I don't want to say adults, but their parents are now moving into, or and there may be sort of they may be fleeing that technology in favor of something else. But
Actually, I heard that in K-12 settings, that's true as
hmm.
well, that they're because parents are starting to now dive into their same social media circles, so they're
Right,
trying to be a moving target.
yeah. We used to use a term, or there was a term that was thrown around previously called the creepy treehouse effect, which I kind of like that.
I'm
It's
writing
kind of a
that
good
down.
description. So let me jump into another question that Stephen and I, prior to the session, were talking about, and where there's some interesting research, and then I'll stop. Is the use of mobile devices in class? Certainly, you're seeing more mobile devices. Students can bring tablets into class now. In addition to laptops, they all have smartphones. So easier to talk about the burden first. So several recent studies, and Amanda, I'm including links to these things in the
Yes, in the chat.
thing, but I don't think other people can see that. So you might have to put that up on the website or however you want to
Yes.
do that.
Yeah, I'll send them the sources afterward.
There was a recent study, 2011, by Alyssa Wood, or Eileen Wood, and others, who compared students who were multitasking with students who weren't. By multitasking, they manipulated that a couple different ways, had them use Facebook and that sort of thing during class. And she found much lower performance, or significantly lower performance, in lecture format when multitasking. I think on the blessing side, if you look at some of the research that Eric Mazur is doing at Harvard on peer instruction and the use of student engagement through things like Top Hat in class, you're starting to see some data that suggests that that kind of activity can have a very positive effect on learning. And so I think what it's coming down to there is really the format and what technologies best support the pedagogies that you're using in class. So I'll stop there. There's a
Definitely a
ton
good
of
point.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that was excellent, though. Great discussion. Thank you for that. We'll move on just so we can address the other issues as well. So the pros and cons of education technology in the classroom.
I always think so. I wrestle with this one a lot because one of the studies we didn't mention was looking at faculty thoughts about online learning, which is a lot of the issues that I deal with. And even at this point, what we see is that a lot of people don't believe that you can have effective online teaching that's just as effective as face to face. And there's lots of data out there that say that you can. And so I think this whole like pros and cons, people get kind of cemented like, is this technology good for the classroom? Yes or no? When really it's context driven. So like one of the tools that I use to think about technology is this TPAC model that was developed by Matt Kaler and Punya Mishra. And basically, it's just a model saying that in order to be effective as an instructor with technology, you really have to think about three domains, kind of the technology domain, the pedagogical domain, and then your content area. So I usually think like any technology by its nature is not inherently good or bad for teaching. It's really about the context that you're using it in. So, you can use a discussion forum in order to kind of bring students together, to have them all speak on a topic. But if you ask a question that is a very factual-based question, you won't have any increase in student engagement or student learning. And so it depends on like what is the question that you're going to ask. Is it, does it engage them? Does it make them connect their understanding to their own situation? Those kinds of questions, I think, kind of drive the pros and cons. I know that the Ken also has another model that they use. They use the Samer model. Is that right, Ken?
Yeah. So we found this useful. It's very simple. So SAMR is just substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. So as we're thinking about whether technology, the value of a technology in bringing it on campus and what faculty can do with it, we try to determine whether this is just a substitution for something else that they can do already, or an augmentation, a slight augmentation of something that they can do already, which those things are good. They can definitely enhance instruction. So putting your syllabus online as a Word document can be helpful. You can make changes to it quickly. It's a good way to communicate with students and keep them up to date. It doesn't really transform the process of structuring your class or interacting with students, helping them stay on track. So we're really looking for technologies that either modify or redefine what a faculty member is doing now, and those are the ones that we think have the biggest payoff. So that's a process that we go through.
Yeah, I think in our situation, like the TPAC model, it's when you can use a technology in a pedagogically appropriate way that allows you to ask questions in the content or in the discipline that you wouldn't be able to normally ask. That's when you really are hitting kind of the sweet spot of using a technology. But I do think there are kind of general pros and cons that you have to consider. I don't think they're necessarily inherent in the technology, but just things that you should really be wrapping your head around if you're going to incorporate technology. One is kind of like the increased workload. So like how much more are you asking faculty and students to do before they really even engage in the material? So there's been some work about cognitive load. So basically how much mental power you can put towards the technology at the same time you're asking them to do content manipulation, right? So if someone doesn't know how to do a discussion forum, are they spending most of their mental energy trying to wrestle with answering a question in a discussion forum as opposed to the actual question that you asked? So usually when incorporating technologies, we kind of limit it to maybe 1 or 2 a semester. That way it kind of reduces the technology hurdle that students have to face in order to interact with the material. So I think that's one of the main cons, is that potentially you're adding more mental processing needed in addition to the content that you're teaching.
So we actually do have a question submitted by Brenda. She wants to know, how can cell phones be used as a blessing in the classroom? So do you guys want to take that on?
I think that, Ken, do you have something right off the top of your head? Or?
Well, it's convenient that we're hosted by Top Hat, because we have plenty of students on our campus that use their cell phones and smartphones as clickers, essentially. And Top Hat has a great app that works on both platforms, and our students really like. So many more of our students are using Top Hat on the app versus through the browser, even though they can bring any of those 3 devices to class. So that's one off the top of my head.
And, this kind of ties back into your comment about Eric Mazur and his work, in that it seems that his work is mostly pointing out that if you keep students engaged using the technology that they're usually distracted by, then they're more likely to stay on target. I think that's kind of one of the take-homes of his work.
Right.
So
Right.
if you have engaging questions and problems that they're using their cell phones for, then they're not going to be using them for other more distractive purposes.
Right. Brenda, I'm not sure if you're working in K-12 or higher ed. The other place that we're finding, and I don't know if you're doing any of this at your school, but we're creating a lot more active learning classrooms now on our campus, where instead of ranks and files, we've got tables, and students are working in groups on projects, and there's some sort of common screen that they're working on. And there are a lot of interesting tools out there now that allow you to share what's going on a smartphone with everybody else by popping it up onto the big screen. So the one that most people are familiar with is something like Apple TV, where they can just connect right to it and display what's going on their device. And so I think there's a role there for phones. We already have some classes in photojournalism where students are going out, they're using their phones as cameras, and then bringing all those pictures into the Photo-J class. And they're in an active learning classroom where they can just sort of flick the pictures up really quickly for their group, and the group can decide which pictures to move forward to the instructor. And so that's another way. It's sort of that bringing the outside world into the classroom, and using your phone as a data collection device.
And I think another thing that you're leveraging at that point is not just using the technology in directly for learning, but you're kind of also leveraging, because they're working in groups, so there's also an element of peer pressure to stay on task and to perform. So I think you're kind of leveraging two things with that model, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
So Brenda responded, and she says she's working in higher education and online learning. You were wondering before. She also has one more question. Let me see if I can find it now for you guys to address. Nope, you already got that one. So, as a faculty member not comfortable with technology, what is the best method to introduce it in the class, since students are so well versed with technology? So, given that she is a higher ed professor and online learning professor, what is the best method of integrating it into her classes?
That is a great question.
Go for it, Stephen.
Yeah.
It's a toughie.
Honestly, well, so I think some of the data that we see, like thinking about how do you integrate it into your classroom, is I think you have to work with things that you're comfortable with, but also what we see is a lot of technology know-how is spread through colleagues. And so I think it's partly about getting a support structure and not kind of going it alone. So figuring out what are your service sources on campus, and if you don't have as many of those, depending on what institution you're at, I think building colleagues that can help you both to troubleshoot, but also to wrestle with pedagogically how do you do things is important. Because I don't think there's not one way to do any of this. And to me, it's a lot of iterative design about trying something and being able to assess it on the fly about what worked and what didn't work, and really kind of thinking about what is the nuts and bolts of that technology and how you can kind of leverage it best in the way that you're trying to reach whatever objective you're trying to reach. Hope that wasn't too hand wavy, but I think in
I
general,
think the. Oh, go ahead.
no.
I think what I see most faculty doing at our institution is getting started by better leveraging their learning management system. So I'm not sure which one you use, Blackboard, D2L, Canvas, it doesn't matter, they're very similar. But branching out a little bit with that tool, so a lot of faculty will start by putting content up and sort of that's where they stay for a while, they sort of plateau. And then we help them learn how to use the discussion tools a little bit better, try something a little different with discussion boards, try adding a little bit more feedback in terms of quiz feedback, using quizzes a little differently, sort of getting a little bit more experience with that tool, which is so pervasive on most campuses.
And usually pretty
then, yeah. The other place where our faculty are starting to do more development now and starting to get a little bit more comfortable is with video capture. So there are so many tools out there now for capturing what were your lectures, when you what are your lectures, and kind of chunking those up a little bit, developing movie versions of those things, and then integrating those into your learning management system, and then better leveraging the communication and collaboration tools that are out there for just having more contact with your students and supporting group work that you might do in your class. It's a really gradual thing. I mean, you start out slowly, you do a little bit every semester, and I don't know how you're supported on your campus, but definitely if you do have teaching and learning groups on your campus, reach out to them. They'd love to help you.
All right, awesome. Let's move on to our next topic of discussion. So how will education technology alter the conventional classroom in the future? That's a good one.
So part of my, so I'm in the zoology department at Michigan State, but I also work as a curator, assistant curator at the Michigan State Museum. And I think we actually see really similar trends with both informal and formal learning with technology. So if you've been to a museum lately, they've been shifting from being kind of a transmission of information to being a getting people involved in the process of creating their own understanding. And I think you see that in both the kind of the classroom as well as kind of in the museum setting. And so I think what we see is a lot of technologies that are about getting students constructing and building and creating as opposed to just passively watching. And this kind of goes hand in hand with all of the active engagement kind of movements that are currently going on. Other kinds of models that you see that are kind of leveraging this is the flipped classroom model. You see things like digital resources for MOOCs and this lecture capture being done at home so that students get kind of the basic material at home, and then when they come into class, it's all about active learning, active group involvement, kind of constructing their own understanding in the classroom. So I think technology has really allowed some of that movement to occur, so that it's now more offloaded in their off time. I can go on for this for a while, so Ken, feel free to jump in whenever.
Yeah, I mean, it really is true. There's so much exciting stuff out there. And I know you and I were talking earlier about the Horizon report. If people aren't familiar with that, the New Media Consortium and EDUCAUSE collaborate to put out a Horizon report that looks at 3 horizons out to about 10 years. And it's really very readable. It's a great thing for administrators to take a look at. Gives a very high-level overview of what is going to happen, on what's on the horizon, and then provide some really nice examples of each thing. So things like wearable devices, that's going to be huge. Things like the Internet of Things, that's going to be huge. And so that report I would highly recommend it.
I think what's interesting about that report is they also tell you like what's in the next year or two, and then what's coming down the pike. So uh, some technologies are just really slow in adoption, and they give you kind of a heads up that you might not want to switch quite so not quite so ready to switch right now to that because it's not really, the infrastructure's not there, or so they give you kind of a better sense or a gauge about which technologies you are more likely to incorporate in the near future. So I think that's another good quality about that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a really nice diagram, and again, I'm assuming I'm telling you things you may know already, but I've leveraged the Gartner Hype Cycle diagram a lot on my campus. It's a favorite in the cabinet. The administration likes it because it's easy to understand, and no disrespect to the cabinet, but the it has basically, if you've seen it before, it's a visual that describes sort of a technology that starts out and it reaches what they call the peak of inflated expectations, and it's where it's the shiniest thing on the block. Everybody wants it, whether it's Google Glass or whatever, and then it drops down into the trough of disillusionment. I like that phrase. And we've all experienced it, right? So the hottest thing yesterday is now the dumbest thing today, that no one thinks is going to make any difference. And then some of those technologies kind of come out of that trough of disillusionment onto the plateau of productivity, and those are the tools that you want to invest in. And so it's important not to get caught up in the hype and pick things at the peak of inflated expectations.
Yeah. I think that this is also kind of a dangerous one in that a question in general, because I think that a lot of there's been a lot of new visions of what education will look like in the future. I think MOOCs have caused this kind of crazed vision of all the possible ways that education could look like in the future, and some of it's very hyperbolic, but I think it's interesting to think about, but not necessarily drive policy, because I think it's way too early in that technology to understand like how do these things change the current structures that we have. But there was, I think, an interesting report in the Atlantic post that about Minerva College or Minerva University, which is basically it was created by industrialists, and so it's got an interesting model that differs kind of from how a lot of what we think of the digital classroom or the classroom of the future, what it might look like. And it incorporates many of the kind of aspects in that we see in the Horizon report. So kind of a more integrated approach between online and hybrid tools, data-driven learning and assessment, turning students from consumers to creators, that kind of thing. So I think it's an interesting model that that you don't normally see, and so that might be something that you might look into just to see what technology might look like in the near future. But in general, I do think there are a lot of apocalyptic premonitions of what's going to happen to education, and some of those I think are a little bit doom and gloom at this point.
Right.
All right. Sorry to cut you guys off. That was a great discussion you had going, but for time's sake, let's move on. And if anyone does have any more questions about this one, feel free to add a discussion or chat it in. So for our next topic, it's which technologies are currently available as classroom resources. So again, more of a broad topic, but we can kind of condense it to the staples, maybe.
Yeah. So, which one of the 500,000 apps? I always like the articles that start out with the top 1,000 apps that all educators should know. Um, I would like to just see an article about one app and dive into the depths of it. But at Winona State, one of the things we do to kind of corral all of that is we categorize software into 4 different categories. So there's what we call core applications, and these are judged to be essential for all students, and they're things that IT would cover. So the one that comes to mind is something like Microsoft Office. Then there are what we call professional applications. So this is an application like Photoshop, where it cuts across multiple disciplines enough that even though we know not everybody on campus is using it, IT would cover the cost of that app for the campus. And then there are what we call disciplinary apps, which are very focused on a particular discipline, like hyperchem or an app like that. And then there are course-specific apps where it's just being used in a specific course. So dividing things up in this way has allowed us to kind of make decisions about where to invest money and where we need help from departments and whatnot, colleges. So then within the core applications, we have sort of focused on key functional categories. So these are things that all students need to be able to do. So one category is access to learning content. So every student needs to be able to access their learning management system, e-books, so they need e-readers, and we're continuously evaluating things like Goodreader and apps that allow students to get access to content, and not just get access to it, but annotate over the top of it and personalize it. We're also looking at things like News 360 and Flipboard and Quartz and other tools that students can use to kind of develop, and faculty to develop, feeds of information so that they can filter stuff that their students need and then bring that into the classroom. And then we're also in that category looking at apps that relate to cloud storage. So we're a Microsoft campus, so we have Office, OneDrive for Business is our cloud storage solution. So there's an app for that. So that's the first category. Second category is personal productivity, note-taking, content personalization. So students need access to tools like we invested in Notability for our students, as well as Evernote, so that students have the ability to take notes using the technology that we're giving them. We actually have some data on that I'd be happy to share at some point. Go ahead.
On those, do you give tutorials do you have trainings for students about how to?
Yeah, we do. So we do face-to-face stuff. We also have a wiki that we use, learn.winona.edu, where we post most of our documentation. And then we have a campus license for lynda.com that we
awesome.
use to provide some of that stuff.
So go ahead.
So just real quick, the other category is communication and collaboration. So we're looking at applications in that space, and that includes not just things like Exchange for email and things like Top Hat, which we have a campus license for. It's been going great, but also things like wireless projection in classrooms, web conferencing through things like this, GoToMeeting. So those are the 3 major categories that we have, and then we look at applications within each of those categories, and there are tons. So one of my jobs and the jobs of my team is to try to help the university understand what is going to work in our environment and what isn't, and we work with students and faculty to reach those decisions. I'll stop there.
Well, so I think your point about what you do for students also gets at this question that was posted about what should be taken into consideration when introducing technology when you have both traditional and non-traditional students. In that, one of the things that we see is actually preparing for non-traditional students, or you could just call them actually novice learners in this case, because you can have traditional students who are also unfamiliar with the technologies. And so I think it's really important that if you are going to adopt a technology, that you also have lessons either through your institution or ones that you create yourself about how do you think and use that technology. Like you really need to help direct and navigate the student through the experience. And so I think it's both best practice, both for traditional and for non-traditional students, because you actually don't know what their background is coming in. So I think it's great, Ken, that you actually offer these services both for students and for faculty.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah,
and I think getting back to Brenda's other question is, or her previous question, I don't know that students are as savvy as you think they are. I think they know what they know. They know Facebook. They can interact with their friends. But if you ask them how to create a table in APA style in Word, no clue.
Yeah.
If you ask them
troubleshooting.
Yeah.
Like troubleshooting in general, they know what to do when it works, but what do you do when it doesn't work is a skill set that that they don't have. And I think this is actually kind of an interesting corollary when we're talking about what's available in the classroom, is also thinking about what skill sets we have to be training students in order to prepare them for their future careers as well. You know, I think we kind of usually drill down on the discipline, but I think you would also benefit your students by, if you're incorporating a technology that's actually used in the discipline, then helping them to gain the skills about how do you use this software, what's the appropriate, both physically, like what are the appropriate steps, but also what is ethical about using that technology. One technology that we used in an ecology class that I taught was using Flickr, which is a photo sharing software. And so they each created an account, and then they would go out to a site and then use their cameras to document the site and to do many experiments and predictions. But I had to have a tutorial at the beginning that said, you know, regardless of how good this assignment is, in 20 years when you're a professional ecologist, this is maybe not something that you wanted associated with your name. So when you create a username, create one that's separate from your name. And, you know, so basically teaching them skills about thinking about their digital identity, I think is also important when you're talking about what technologies you're going to use and what you're going to expect them to do in the classroom.
Right. I really enjoyed Howard Rheingold's book, Net Smart. If you've not looked at it, he talks about different literacies that are sort of, we're trying to work into our interactions with students, and you've hit on a lot of them, so it's a great point.
Definitely a really good point. I don't think anyone really thinks about that side, so it's great that you brought it up. Let's move on to the last topic of discussion for this webinar. So are schools adopting new technologies quickly enough, and what impact does this have in higher education? So the impact of the current technology adoption curve.
So, yeah, this is a tough question to answer in the time that we have left, but what I will say, I could do a whole session on this one. So, are they adopting things fast enough? You know, it depends on the day. I mean, sometimes I feel like it's way too fast, and then other times I think, man, it's glacial in its speed. But I think, you know, we've already talked about some important decisions that you need to make before you decide to adopt a technology, and then things that you need to do to actually help the students and faculty integrate that technology into their instruction. So this isn't going to happen just by dumping something onto your campus. We definitely know that. I think in terms of Roger's diffusion of innovation curve, I think most campuses now are, you know, they've gotten through the early adopters are doing their thing, and more faculty are sort of moving up that that curve and becoming more comfortable with technology, and they're learning things that are transferable. So, changing learning management systems, updating learning management systems. It used to be 10 years ago that was catastrophe. That was the end of the world for a lot of people. And but now you can make those changes fairly easily. I'm oversimplifying, but it's not as dramatic for people, that change. So I think things are definitely changing in terms of diffusion of innovation in higher ed in particular. But things like flipped classroom are taking a very long time. Active learning in class are taking a longer time to be adopted because there are forces beyond our control that are causing those things to not be adopted. So anyway, I didn't do that justice at all. Sorry.
Totally. I think there are two other forces that I think are interesting with regards to this speed thing, which is one, thinking about how students are trained before higher ed, and I think you see a lot more of these flipped classroom models, of these active learning models. So I think it'll be interesting to see if that actually pushes higher ed to respond in a similar way. But then working in the opposite direction, I think one of the things that we've seen on our campus is the difficulty when trying to also manage things like accessibility and security of student information. And so like all of these third-party vendors of materials are not really held at the same level of stringent concern with regards to these types of matters. And so like you can't adopt some of these technologies because they aren't accessible to screen readers, or it's putting student data out there in a way that's not doesn't comply with FERPA, which is the Family Rights Protection. Oh, I knew I was going to mess that up. Hold on. You probably already all know the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So it kind of limits what technologies we've been able to adopt and actually institutionally back. So I think there are other concerns, right, besides just is this pedagogically appropriate, that also have to be balanced.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you so much for that discussion. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to that, or do you want us to move on? Ken, Stephen?
I'm good, unless there's a questioner.
I'm good.
No questioner. All right. Awesome. So just to wrap up, let's launch one last question. So has this webinar inspired you to try technologies or new technologies in the classroom? So this is a poll question. It's a multiple choice. And again, you just need to scroll above your slides and submit that. And don't forget to press the submit button. You can also text it in with this code right here. 70%, 80%. All right, give it another couple seconds. All right, I'll disable submissions. Let's see your responses. Oh. So 8 said yes, and 2 said I'm not sure. I think that's a success for for Ken and Stephen.
I wasn't sure about talking about all the limitations. If that was
I was sweating there.
Well, I think you both
it's like
did
an evaluation.
You both did an amazing job. 80% said that they learned something new, and you've inspired them. So that's definitely a success in my books. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much, Ken and Stephen, for those stimulating discussions. I'm sure you've given us all a lot to think about. And we will definitely be sending out a recording of this webinar, as well as those links that Ken has sent to me, complementing some of the questions that they were addressing. So if you do want to share that along, you can definitely do that. That should be out by tomorrow. So thank you again for everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.